Hello and welcome to Fractal Model 20.9, the newest release for the Fractal model. We're excited to have you. Today we're going to give you a brief overview followed by an extensive demo. The new Fractal model has a lot of features. We will cover those today. We will cover a few business models and we will show you how to optimize using the Fractal model. The Fractal model is essentially for anyone who needs to evaluate the value of a storage project, whether that's very early on in a project life, whether that's to find the optimized business model, to evaluate whether a project is financeable, or whether you should acquire a project. Also, EPCs are using the Fractal model to properly size and plan for augmentations, for sizing of auxiliary loads, and losses as it pertains to round-trip efficiency. The cool thing about the Fractal model is that it can do standalone storage, it can do PV+ storage, both AC and DC. It could do wind plus storage. It can even do wind plus solar plus storage. Here's a list of the top 10 things we improved upon between 20.6 and this new 20.9. I'll cover these features as we go through the demo. We included monthly cash flows. We have a self-optimizer for how you size the storage. And we have the ability for you to put in reserve funds and to estimate when you're going to do inverter and battery replacements. As mentioned, the Fractal model has a lot of features. As we go through the demo, I'll showcase them. So let's get started. Here's Fractal model 20.9. The dashboard is largely the same, just a few features that make it a little bit easier to use. As mentioned, the Fractal model can do standalone storage, solar plus storage, AC coupled, DC coupled, wind plus storage. It can do a combination of the wind plus solar plus storage. It's really just as easy as turning things off and on with the Fractal model. So we're now in a solar only. We have features where you can find the PPA price given the parameters you've put in. And this is on a monthly cash flow. If we turn the storage back on, we can toggle between AC coupled and DC coupled. Notice that the one-line diagram gets shaded out if you're not using it. That's helped us from being confused. I've spent a little bit of time on this front page, but let me give you a 5-minute overview. For those who just want a quick overview of what the Fractal model is, it'll be done in about 5 minutes. For those of you who want a more in-depth demo, stick around, take it about an hour to go through different features, business cases, and ways to optimize with the Fractal model. The second page in the Fractal model is where you do a lot of the system inputs. It's where you put in cost, where you put in financing, and where you can put in reserve funds. Here in the CAPEX, you can see how we put in cost. Notice the units. This helps properly price a project as we're looking at different configurations, different power, different energies, different beginning of life oversizes. One of the cool things in this new Fractal model is that you can expand this and you can compare multiple prices. You can name all these, whatever you feel like naming. Come over here to the drop down and you can evaluate these different prices as it automatically gets populated over here. Same thing for OPEX. You can drop this down, choose which pricing you want to use. As we scroll down to OPEX, the nice thing about the Fractal model is that we give you a lot of rules of thumb for the OPEX cost. A lot of people are surprised about the different facets of OPEX. It's not that OPEX is a whole lot for storage, but it's just that if you're unaware of some of the costs, it can really wreck your project. The OPEX for a storage project is very close to a solar project with the same CAPEX. It's just that you spend the money differently. You see here with best OPEX that we have some costs that you could call fixed, and then you have other costs that are headlined by the aux load, but can include things like extended warranty, property taxes, land costs. As we scroll down even more, there's other options to put in, but we'll cover that during the longer demo. This page is where we do a lot of the engineering. You can put in efficiencies for different pieces of equipment. This page will help you size both the inverter and the batteries. And you can come here and do peak aux load calculations. The next page is our battery page. This is a really, really important page. It's where we pick chemistries. So we have a drop down where we can go through, pick different chemistries. This one you can see has really, really different shape from the first one. And then we go to a third one. So just really, really different types of shapes that could affect your project financials in the long run. You can also change up how you do your augmentation. So we could go from having a strategy where we maintain the energy of the battery to one where we let it degrade. This next page is where we enter our generation profiles. We have wind here, and then we enter solar in either or both of these columns. So the left-hand solar column is for panel capacity, really important if we're going to do DC coupled solar plus storage. The right-hand column is where we enter the AC production, and we are flexible in what we put in here. I'll get to that during the longer demo. On this page, we configure the applications that the battery will perform. And those are things like shifting, regulation, spin. We come in here and we tell the model what the physics and the financials are for that particular application. And then on this next page, we're able to dispatch the battery. I'll start by explaining that we have a scheduler where on a monthly basis, we tell the model what the hourly schedule is that we will perform for each day of the month. For those of you who are a little bit of nerds, we can do a higher resolution dispatch than this, but I will say especially for the initial analysis of a project, this works extremely well. But if you do have like timestamp by timestamp dispatches, the Fractal model can also handle that. So how are we doing this? This scheduler is color-coded, and you can see that the colors correspond to these tiles over here. These tiles are stacks of applications, those applications being the shifting, the regulation, the spin. And we come in here, we stack them on top of each other. For this blue one, we could add or we could remove something like spin. And what we've done for demo purposes, the blue is charge, the red is discharge, the gray is just idles, just hanging out. The green is regulation, the purple is spin, and then the orange is also charge, like the blue, but it can only charge from renewables, whereas the blue can charge from the grid. Perhaps we can test this a little bit. If you recall on the front page, this is what's driving this site profile. So our schedule is driving this site profile. We are charging a little bit throughout the day from the solar, and then we discharge at night, right? Charge during the day. You can see the solar heat map in the middle, and we discharge at night. So we could do a few things, like we can try to charge at night, and if we look at our site output, we see nothing happens. But if we put in a blue, now it will try to charge from solar, but if there is no solar, it will charge from the grid. And now you see that we're charging during the grid during these certain hours. And by the way, these two plots are actually plotting the same thing. It just looks slightly different. So it gives you different perspectives on what's going on. The other interesting thing is that when we do elect to charge from the grid, the Fractal model will keep track of your ITC compliance. Here we're 98%. If we do this even more, well, we could go down to 88%. You can evaluate whether foregoing some of your ITC is worth it compared to the revenue that you're going after. The next page is the cash flow. Everything flows into the cash flow. You have all your CAPEX, you have your revenue, you have your OPEX below that. And then after your EBITDA section, we can do some loans, whether that's for construction or for term debt, and then it gets to your IRR. Most people will take our pre-tax and put it into their financial model. That's very useful because you can either put in the annual or you can scroll over and put in the monthlies. We have both periodicities. Then as an option, you can scroll down and you can view Fractal's after-tax cash flow. It's there for you just in case you want to take a look. And we break it down. We have both showing both the annual and monthly results, and you can see the rates of return here. The last thing on this overview is this sensitivities page. On this page, you can come in and you can turn these sensitivities on and off, and you can see how much of an effect a different escalation rate will have on your revenue streams or your cost. So you can turn on cost and put in a different escalation rate, or you can do it with the revenue streams, and you can see as we turn this off and on that the IRR up above goes up and down. All right, that is a quick overview of the fractal model. So for those of you who just wanted a quick overview, we hope that you find the fractal model might be interesting. If you do, please feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to do a longer demo with you. Or if you have some more time, stick with me. I'm going to go through the fractal model. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff, a lot of cool business cases, a lot of features, a lot of ways to optimize. So let's jump in. On this page, there are a few really useful tools. I already showed how we have a PPA calculator. We have something similar for the storage. Given that we have a duty cycle with 365 cycles, you can take a peek at cycle life both on the battery page and on the dispatch page. Given the CAPEX for this project, given the OPEX, given the duty cycle and the subsequent augmentations, this calculator will tell us what we need to charge as a capacity payment for an 8% return, no escalator, and 20-year contract. As you can see, we've gone for 8%. It's calculated what the 8% return is. So in this case, for everything that we've put into this model, we need $10 per kilowatt month to get our 8% return. If we have a higher return, well, we put that in, calculate it, goes from 10 to 1120. This calculator is what you use to answer most of the RFPs that are out there. And we've built it so that it makes your life a lot easier. It is extremely easy to come up with the proper capacity payment. It's just so fast. A few other things on this page, as you look over some of these parameters, one thing that's really interesting is as you go from storage only to solar plus storage and then AC coupled, DC coupled, notice how the production changes as you toggle between AC coupled and DC coupled. So here you see that the DC coupled has more production, and if you think about it, it makes sense. You're charging directly from the source, and then on the AC coupled, you have extra piece of equipment that you're going through. The model is sensitive to that. Another thing that the model is sensitive to, especially when you're doing your monthly cash flows, is when COD is, and then when your NTP is. And this allows you to go in and put in different CAPEX at different months. So for the next page, as we go through a more extensive demo, we've already mentioned you could do several pricing scenarios. You can put in whatever names you want here. Anything that's in blue is an input. If it's referenced somewhere else, then it'll change in other places. This tool is really useful because we can go out to RFP, we can grab a lot of quotes, and then we can compare what we feel are the best quotes. And you can add columns if you want. But typically, 3 or 4 is going to be good enough. The other interesting thing to expand upon is our estimates for OPEX. A lot of people who are new to storage don't know the ranges of prices for OPEX. So we put in what I would say is a median price for different aspects of OPEX. Insurance, we've seen could be as low as 0.1% on an annual basis of hard costs, all the way to 0.9. We've unfortunately seen that high of a price. The EMS for a project doesn't necessarily scale linearly. If you look in here, you will find that this is being indexed to some of the formulas that are in here. Notice how intricate this formula is. As the battery gets smaller, the EMS cost doesn't go down as linearly as, say, the cost of the batteries go down. You have the same equipment controls that you must purchase whether the battery is 1 megawatt or 100 megawatts. There are costs in there that are pretty fixed. Monitoring and maintenance, those two will really depend on the type of battery you have and on your business case. So if you're going to perform Reg D, you probably need to watch the battery 24/7. If you're only doing solar shifting, well, you might be able to reduce this cost because you just need business hours or daylight hours. And then preventative maintenance and corrective maintenance, those can swing depending on who you buy the battery from, who you have on staff that might be able to do maintenance, and how reliable the battery is as far as breaking and getting it repaired. Keep in mind there are other costs for batteries. One that's often overlooked is QSC cost. And this is the cost to clear your trades in different ISOs. In most ISOs, you have a middleman who's going to broker the trade and then verify that you did what you said you're going to do and that the ISO pays you for your services. So there's someone who helps you with that. That cost can be somewhere on the order of $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 per year, just depending on who you have as a QSC, how many assets you have in your portfolio, and what the battery's doing. Make sure you account for things like your extended warranties and for property tax and things like land costs. So those are all things that you can put in here as options. As we scroll down a little bit more, we saw that there is a Aux Load Cost here in row 107. That comes from this Aux Load calculator right here. In this Aux Load calculator, we are using the inputs that you put in here to the Aux Load calculator. We have things like efficiencies, standby loads, other loads, and as we're calculating the round trip efficiencies because of the duty cycle you put in, well, we're also calculating the heat that's produced and the cost for the lights and the electronics. In our Aux Load calculator, you see that we break down Aux Load into 5 different buckets. The throughput has to do with the amount of heat that is produced as the battery is operating. The ambient is because of where you are in the country or the world, because it's hot or cold outside. House loads, these are the lights, the electronics, things like the BMS, fire suppression. These have electrical loads that tax your system. If you scroll down a little bit more, you can put in your taxes, incentives. You can take a look at what's going on with your augmentations. These are all pre-populated depending on what you do on the battery tab. One of the new features, we have inverter replacements. Here you can take a look at our recommendations of when you might need to replace an inverter. Here you see for solar, we would replace this inverter after about 14 years. For storage, we may not need to replace this inverter. And then we can come down here and we can put the cost. If we think that an inverter might be about $60 per kilowatt for the equipment, well, maybe we add an extra 20 for the labor and EPC. We put in a year for that replacement, and our financials change as a result. The other thing you could do that goes along with the inverter replacements is you can have a reserve fund. And it's as easy as turning this off and on. As you see, the rate of return will also change, and it depends on the tax treatment, whether it is an expense or whether it is a form of delayed revenue. And then farther down, we have our financing. So you can put in construction loans, you can put in term financing, and you can put in tax equity, which is an advanced feature. Not going to cover it in this demo, but we can certainly help you with that. The next tab is where we do system design. This has all your efficiencies. This has the ability to help you size the battery and the inverter. And we've already mentioned how you can put in parameters to help you size the aux load. That goes in and helps you to understand the cost for your aux load. So in this page, you can click here and you can see that we have formulas for the efficiencies of these equipment. Cool thing is that you can come in and you can say, well, instead of having this curve that perhaps peaks at 98.64, I just want to use a static number. And we can choose to have this static number. The cool thing is our rate of return is changing as we're clicking this button. So this lower static efficiency is having an effect on the project financials. Another useful tool, down here we help you to understand the size for the battery and the inverter. Here we have the amount of battery power that's required, the amount of inverter that's required in order to get 50 megawatts of power at the POI. And then we calculate how much battery is required. As you change the allowable depth of discharge, you can see that these numbers change. If we have a really restrictive C rate, then we really have to adjust our numbers. I'm going to change it back for now. This page is where you can do a lot of tweaking on the physics of the battery, really help you to understand how many batteries you're going to actually have to buy. The next page is our battery page. Keep in mind, we are still doing the solar shifting, so we're charging up during the day from solar, shifting at night. For the solar production that we have in here, and the size of this battery, we're getting 363 cycles per year. This gives us a certain resting SOC, a certain average SOC. We've sized it initially with this 15.2 oversize, and then we have a couple of augmentations that gets us a firm capacity through year 15. Then after year 15, we let the battery degrade, and then perhaps this battery, given the way we've defined system life, might last 27 years. But for financial purposes, we've actually just told the model, hey, just do this analysis based on 20. So maybe we have a little bit of extra life we could take advantage of. A really nice feature is that you can come in and change the chemistries. You can take a look at this chemistry, which is an NMC. There's an NMC pouch. It's a little bit more robust. There is a NCA battery. There's a few different LFPs. And as we go through these, you can tell that we should approach our augmentations a little bit differently depending on the chemistry. And what's nice is that the new fractal model has a tool that can automate that for you. So here we can tell the model, I want you to maintain the battery for 20 years, and the model's going to go through, it's going to take a look at different oversizes, different approaches to augmentations, and it's going to log all those and pick the combination that gives you the best IRR. So here we see that our best combination for this particular chemistry with these forecasts of prices, this is the best augmentation strategy for this chemistry. Now if we pick a different chemistry, same exercise, and I'll fast forward, and this is the preferred augmentation strategy. So the next page is where we enter generation, just like we did on the earlier demo. This is one of the more confusing pages of the fractal model. Here we define the applications that we will use. This table allows us to put in both the physics and the financials of individual applications. And those applications like shifting, like spin, like regulation, could be capacity, whether that's ICAP or RA. We define these applications, and it does take a little bit of time to understand how to define them. What happens is we enter prices into the model, and here we see summaries of those prices, and then we can come to the dispatch page and start to create business models or dispatches for the battery. As you already know, we've started with the solar shift, and this is us charging from solar during the day and then discharging at night. The blue is for charge, the red is for discharge, gray is idle, the green regulation, purple is spin, and then the orange is a charge that can only charge from solar. Now that we understand that that schedule creates this site profile, and once again you can do things like turn things off and on just to kind of double check where you are. So we can change things up. And one of the cooler things about the fractal model is that as you enter prices, and once again here's summaries of those prices, as you enter prices, the fractal model can help you with how to do things like arbitrage. So here we have picked real-time prices to take a look at, and the fractal model says this is the recommended way to arbitrage. So it's just a quick click of the button, and now all of a sudden we are arbitraging. Notice that our ITC is 0. We are not going to maintain our ITC, but this is us arbitraging. And if we take a look at our site profile, now it's markedly different. Now might be a good time to go solar only and take a look at how the project fares. Most of the time you are charging in the early morning. If you can't tell yet, this is ERCOT pricing, and that's because you have these low prices during the early morning. So ERCOT, SPP, MISO are going to have very similar shapes. In California, your shape might look like this, where you have a lot of solar charging and then shifting in the late evening. If we just happen to be doing these prices, then our shape will look like that. I'm gonna show you a little bit more of that here in a bit, but let's roll with this for now. In our cash flow, you see two main revenue streams for the BESS. Frankly, the energy is not making a lot of money. One way to think about this, if we go back to our dashboard, we can use this capacity calculator to figure out how much money we need to make. If 10% return for a kind of 50-50 split between contractor revenue and merchant revenue might work for you, well, we hit calculate. A $14.63 capacity payment per kilowatt month might work out. The other way to look at it is that something in the realm of 8.78 million is going to be your return. However, we can make this a little more relevant, and we can put in an escalation payment. With this escalation payment, in the first year, we need to make something like 7.2 million, and then if it continues to escalate at 2.5, well, then we'll meet our 10% return. So 7.2 million is our goal. Right now, we're making 4.1, which is just not going to cut it. So we need to come back and we need to take a look at our business model and see if we can find a way to optimize how we're making money. So the first thing Fractal would recommend is to incorporate ancillary services. The way to easily do this in the Fractal model is to take your duration, which is 4 hours, and reduce it to 3. And this allows us to incorporate ancillary services. And let's try to incorporate spin. What we're going to do is shift this battery for 3 hours a day and then leave 1 hour in the tank so that we could do ancillaries all other times of the day. And notice after I change our starting SOC to 25%, that we are keeping at least 25% in the tank so that we can perform the ancillary service, which is spin, and we can do shifting on top of that. Now, what's interesting about this is that our cycle count has changed, right? We're doing like 3/4 of a cycle per day instead of 1 full cycle per day. So we might be able to change up our degradation strategy. We don't need it to go 25 years. So if we run this again, this is our new degradation strategy. So less cycles, less augmentations, makes sense. We're making 5.6. So we're getting closer. One thing we can do is evaluate whether a 4-hour battery is actually worth it. So maybe we just need a 2-hour battery. Let's change that up. At a 2-hour battery, we'd come in, we'd change up our dispatch a little bit. So to have 1 hour in the tank, we do a 1-hour shift. We schedule this. Make sure that we have 1 hour in the tank at all times. Good to go. We go back to the calculator. And for this 2-hour battery, we need to make 4.4 million per year. We go to our cash flow. We're making 6.3, hence why our rate of return is now 15.6. So we've optimized around how we're using this battery. A couple things, I have some stuff in here that perhaps we'd want to remove depending on what market we're in. So this has an impact on the rate of return, but for some people, 14.5% is still going to be a really nice rate of return. Another thing we could do is go into the sensitivity. And for something like spin, especially if it's in a market like ERCOT, we could come in and we could say, well, we think ERCOT is going to dilute in the next few years. So maybe we have dilution that looks something like this. And then maybe it levels out and we get a kind of a flat escalation after that. So then, this project in this scenario wouldn't look so good. Depending on the forecast that we have and depending on what we're doing, it has a possibility of working out. Under this scenario, you really have to be cost conscious. So perhaps we go back to inputs and we say, how does our CAPEX affect our rate of return? And we have several scenarios here with this high case. This high case will give you the best rate of return because it has the lowest cost. If we put this in for CAPEX, then our rate of return jumps up a little bit, which could help us get to the right rate of return. So that's a standalone storage and how you might optimize. Let's take a look at a few other features. I'm going to change the model back to solar plus storage. So we'll go AC coupled at first. I'll turn the solar on, and then I'll put in a dispatch that is a solar dispatch. Just going to reference whether there's solar production, and if there is, then we'll try to charge. If there isn't, then we'll just go idle, put that in. We'll bring back the shift at night. We'll take down the starting SOC. And now we're back to where we started. We have the solar plus storage where we're charging a little bit during the day and then we're discharging at night. And then let's do one last thing and put in the longer duration. Here we go. A few things with solar plus storage. One question we often get is about clipping recapture. With the Fractal model, it's actually as simple as just clicking this and selecting clip charge. If we go back here, we see that all of a sudden the storage kind of goes away. What's happening is there's not enough clipping for it to really register. So we need to increase our panel sizing. We can easily change panel sizing by toggling this button. You can see going back and forth, you either input the panel capacity or you enter the DC-AC ratio. So if we go up a little bit higher in the ratio, a couple things happen. One thing that happens is that I didn't turn on DC coupling, so let me do that right quick. All right, there we go. So now a couple things happen. First, our solar profile is pretty broad during the summer, and you can also see that down here, pretty broad, but we are getting some charging. And now if we look at our cycle count, we see we have 34 cycles for this DC-AC ratio. If we pump up the volume a little bit more, now we have this profile where the spring, summer, and fall are very broad, and we're getting a whole lot more shifting. And then you can see this shifting down here, and we can see we have 162 cycles. It's being registered more and more. But all the while, as you're doing this, and depending on the revenue streams, you're going to affect your rate of return. Right? And especially if you put in a revenue stream where you get paid more for doing the discharges during certain parts of the day, well, that's going to help your revenue. We'll turn this off and just take a look at the normal charging. So this is now back to kind of normal charging, but you can see this very broad profile here. Another way to go about this, some people ask, what if I have a contract where I need to deliver firm energy for a huge block of the day? So in that case, we can come in and we can say, well, I want the battery to discharge, let's say, I don't know, starting at this time of day. What we do is we oversize the solar so that it can produce compared to either the POI or the inverter capacity. We can modulate based on either of those. And so we would do that by putting a ridiculous oversize. So this oversize will get us this profile. The other way to do it is to restrict your POIs. You can go lower on your POI. This makes it to where your battery is discharging into the evening. If you want to keep discharging into this area, well, let's make your battery bigger. Right? Now you have this profile. If you want to keep going from here, well, add more duration. Right? Now you have this profile. And you're doing pretty well during the summer, but you can see during the winter, we're lacking a little bit. So this probably means we need to add a little bit more solar. So maybe we go to this ratio, right? And now, for the most part, you are pretty darn solid from, call it 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. You have pretty much solid, firm power during that period. And if you want to know what your PPA is going to be, you change this back to PPA so that the battery gets paid at a PPA payment. Let's turn off the capacity payment for now. Go back to the front page, click Calculate PPA. For a 6% return, we need to charge $41.05. This pays for both the solar and the storage for this particular profile. One other interesting thing you can do is reference market prices with your solar. So let's put this back to the original configuration. And in our dispatch, we can come in and we can reference real-time prices. Just a couple tweaks down here. But we come in and essentially just program it. So we could say, if this is telling us that there's a high price, which is the red B's, right? So if it equals a red B, then we want to take advantage of that price. So we copy that formula over, And this is how you would dispatch to take advantage of market prices. You just do one last thing. You say, well, I want to do real-time prices during those periods, so that will change your IRR. This is how you approach a solar plus storage where you're chasing after real-time prices. Thank you so much for joining me on this demo. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to schedule a demo. The Fractal model comes with 25 hours of support. It also comes with a library of pre-built models for different ISOs, for different situations. So one of the nice things about being a Fractal model licensee is that you get to start with pre-built, pre-optimized models, and it saves a lot of time, saves a lot of effort, reduces a lot of errors. So reach out to us if you have any questions, and we look forward to helping you.